Good morning, family. This week, God pressed Psalm 27 into my heart, and I just see it showing up all over the place, and particularly verse number 4 of 27. And here's what it says: "One thing I've asked of the Lord, that will I seek after, that I may dwell in the house of the Lord all the days of my life, to gaze upon the beauty of the Lord and to inquire in his temple." David says, one thing that I seek, one thing that I ask for. I could ask for a million things, but this one thing in this moment right now that I seek is to dwell in the house of the Lord and to gaze upon this beauty. And this week, God challenged me by that, to just sit and linger in the presence of the Lord. And I have to be honest. If somebody were to ask me, like, hey, what's the one thing that you want more than anything else? Like, whether it's in prayer or in your life, what's the one thing? I don't think that I would have said to just sit and linger with the Lord. To sit and say, I just want to be in the presence of God. Like I'd probably give you some cool answer that would get around to that, like to make you feel that's what I was really, but I don't think that I would have said, like, man, the one sole desire of my life right now is to sit and just linger in the presence of God. Because for me, sometimes prayer is more of a performance than it is anything else. And that's probably sketchy for me to say as a guy who's getting ready to teach you in just a few minutes, right? But when I say that it's more of a performance, I'm not saying that it was a joke. I'm not saying that it was fake. I'm not saying that I was trying to make something up by any means. It wasn't an act for me. What I'm saying is, like, when I'm praying with all of my heart, I was focused more about me not looking like a fool in front of everybody else, and so that I might be able to accomplish the tasks that God's put in front of me, right? Like, God, show me more of you. Like, God, give me wisdom. Teach me your ways. Help me to walk in your ways. Help me to not mess up and not to stumble, and to let your word be a light into my path. Like, let me be in that place. Lead me in paths of the righteousness for your name's sake. Not for my name's sake, but for your name's sake. And chip away all the garbage and all that junk out of my life. But do it so I don't look like a fool in front of everybody else. So I can do the tasks that you've put in front of me and not look like, so I can lead my family, so I can lead RCC, so I can lead the elders, so I can lead the deacons, so I can lead our life group, so I can lead a men's group, so I can lead in all these different areas. But do it, Lord, so that I don't make a fool out of myself while I'm standing in front of people. There was this arrogance inside of me that kept me from just sitting in the presence of Lord. I don't want to say kept, because I don't think it's past tense. I think this is something that I still struggle with. It's like just to sit in the presence of God and say, I don't want anything else other than just to sit and linger and to take in your beauty. This one thing that David says, like you say, seek my face, O Lord, and it's your face that I seek. And I just don't think that I'm always in that place. And so this week, the Lord challenged me and said, hey, what's the one thing that you want more than anything else? And I think what I want more than anything else, guys, is I want to learn to linger. I want to learn to just sit in his presence for nothing else. Not to be better at my job, not to be better at being a dad, not to be better at being an employee, not to be better at anything else. I just want to learn to sit and linger and bask in the presence of God and say, it's your face, Lord, that I seek. It's your face, it's your presence, it's being with you that I want more than anything. And if things get better in my life, great. But if they don't, this is what I want. I just want to get comfortable being with you. And so I was really challenged this week just to begin to clear the stage of my heart, to begin to create this place where lingering is okay. That I don't have to speed off into the next thing. I don't have to rush through this so that I can get to the next thing. That I just be a man who lingers with other people and be a man who lingers with the Lord as well. And my prayer is that that's not just for me, that becomes us as a body together. That we learn to practice presence with the Lord. And as we were sitting with the teaching team this week, this song popped into my mind. And I asked Tony, I said, hey, would you sing this for us this week? Because it's a challenging song, and it kind of speaks to this idea a little bit. So I want him to play. And what I would ask you to do is just to sit and listen. The words are going to be on the screen so you can see the words and you can take in the words. And if the Lord just leads you to sing, go ahead and sing. But what I really want is for you just to hear the words that are being sung over you right now. Like, there's so many things that get in the way, that cause distraction in our life, and that we add to the middle of our life, and we add so much value there that we don't say that we devalue, but we functionally begin to devalue this time that we have with the Lord. And the Lord just was pressing that on me this week and saying, what's the one thing? What's the one thing that you want more than anything else when it comes to prayer? I want you to turn to Psalm 139. That's going to be our text that we're going to dig into this morning. But just the very thought of beginning to clear the stage and prepare a place of worship, where prayer becomes this place of worship, and worship isn't sold out to just a song where we come and we sing and we do all the fun, glitzy, glamour kind of things, the lights and all that. Like so many times we sell out this presence with the Lord, and we settle for so much less. And I do the same thing. Like I settle for less when He's calling me just to sit and just to bask in the glory of who He is, and that's okay. That's where it's good. And I think if we were to try to boil prayer down to one aspect or one main thing, I think we could say that prayer is all about presence, or prayer is presence. It's us being present and sitting before the very presence of a holy God who is all present, like He is always there, that He doesn't go anywhere. That prayer is about presence. But if prayer is about presence, I think we're really hurting in our society because we really struggle with the very idea of being present. Like, we really struggle being present anywhere. And I mean, we can be physically in the same space with somebody, but I think sometimes we're not mentally or emotionally there anymore. There's so many different ways that we can check out. Like, we're there, but we're not really there. And so it's hard for us to imagine a God that is always there, that He's never going anywhere, because we haven't seen very real human examples of that in our lives. And especially in the society that we're living that is so distracted right now. And it's even hard in our own life to hit pause long enough that we can sit and we can be present with God, because we've conditioned ourselves to not really know how to have a sustained presence with anyone or anything. Like, we don't know how to just sit with somebody anymore. I don't think this is just me, right? I mean, you look all around, the observations are so incredibly clear. I mean, I saw it as I was driving to work this morning, or driving to churches when there were two people that were sitting out it looks like they were having a fantastic time. I can't judge somebody's heart and what they're doing, but you have this like a glorious morning, it feels great outside, and there they are, like it's right there on the phone. Like, they're having time together, but they're there together, but they're not together. And you just see this distraction everywhere. And so if we've been conditioned to be absent emotionally emotionally or mentally absent from the people that are around us, like, how do we get to this place where we're not willing to be distracted even in our time with God? So if prayer is about presence and being present in the presence of God, and we have a hard time being present, then what do we do? Where do we go from here? Well, I'm guessing that most of y'all have a cell phone with you. It's probably in your pocket or somewhere close to you on the seat, or I'm guessing you didn't leave it out in the car, because we don't do that kind of stuff anymore. So if you have a phone, I want you to go ahead and pull it out. And some of you are like, I'm not pulling my phone out. You're about to make an example out of me. Like, go ahead, pull it out. All right. We carry them, right? Like, we do. There's nothing against us having a phone, but this is going to be the example for us this morning. These things have the potential to help us so much. They have the potential to help add into our ability to be present, but they also have the distinct possibility to distract us from being present with one another, and to distract us from being present with the Lord. Like, the way that they can help us be present is like, there's reminders on them, right? Like, you can set a reminder, or you can set a notification like, I've got a meeting with so-and-so, and I need to make sure that I'm there. How many times has your phone saved you because you put a calendar notification in there that I need to meet with them, or I need to have a conversation with them, and then it comes to that day, you're like, oh no, I forgot about that. And it actually adds for your ability to be able to be present, because you didn't forget. They felt valued because you showed up. That's saved me so many times. And so it adds value in that way. We can take our phone and we can add a Bible app and we can read Scripture on our phones, and it's fantastic because it can lead us into His presence. We can take our phones and we can download blogs or we can read blogs, and the accessibility of information is so fantastic. And that can lead us into the presence and understanding of who God is. We can download music onto our phones. I don't know about for you, but for me, like music it is one of those personal things that just kind of brings me into this place of being present with the Lord. Music that is filled with angst and longing, Lord, show me how. Like that draws me into this place of being present. And so our phones can have a huge impact in helping us connect. But our phones also, outside of a healthy relationship, when we begin to have this dysfunctional relationship to our device, it can pulverize presence. It can keep us so distracted that we don't even know how to be present any longer, because here's what happens. We set it next to us, or some of us are face down people because we don't want to be distracted when we're around people, but the phone is right there. And some of us are face up people because we want to see the notification when it comes in. Some of us put it in our pocket because we don't want to be distracted. But there's no way to not be distracted when a notification goes off. And it doesn't even have to go off. And here's the thing, like we just thinking that a notification is going to come. Like I messaged somebody and now I'm expecting a message back, and I don't know why they're not messaging me back. I don't know. Or I posted something, I'm waiting to see if I get a like. And there's this thing that's mentally going on in our brain that we are waiting for notification. Even when we're not getting a notification, we're waiting for notifications. And so instead of being fully present with people, we're finding ways to be checked out when we're checking in on our devices. And so what needs to happen for some of us, I'm going to soapbox in just a second, okay? But what needs to happen for some of us is that we need to get back to having a healthy relationship to our devices. Or we need to get, some of us, like in this moment right now, we need to divorce our device. That we need to break up with our device or our computer or this thing that is constantly distracting us, because it's destroying our ability to be present with anyone or anything, and especially our presence with God Himself. And so we've got to create some type of healthy relationship. And for some of you, you're already filled with angst because you're thinking like, I can't do that. Like, what are you talking about? Like, you're so retro right now. You're like so out of the loop. Like everything is geared to your phone. Everything is geared to devices. Like you are so out of touch with reality. And so angst is building up, and you're building your case against me of why I'm an idiot standing up here in front of you. But this thing, like we could talk about anything, right? We could talk about distractions from TV to sports to fantasy football, but that would be way too close to us right now because it just kicked off. And so, but the reality is for the next 12 to 16 weeks, there are guys in this room and gals too that are going to be so disconnected because they are so geared in to who's picking up points on the field. And we're going to be so geared in for ladies, so talk to us today. All right? Talk to, because you're not going to have a conversation with us for the next 16 weeks. So it's not just our phones that distract us. It's anything that we add value to that we're willing to say, you know what, I'll let that replace something else that's important into my life. And so we're willing to be distracted by so many things. But we're only talking about this one today because this one tends to be the one that destroys us or destroys presence more than anything else. Did you know that studies have shown that we look at our phones or we touch our phones, we check our phones every 4 minutes? The average is every 4 minutes, which means that there are people that are touching this thing every 30 seconds, every minute, and some that are touching it, every 6 minutes there. But the average is that we are going to look at our phone, whether there is a message there or not, every 4 minutes. And so here's what that means for us, that we have the ability to check out without even looking at this thing, because our brains have been conditioned and our bodies have been conditioned that we think that there's something there to look at within every 4 minutes. And it's breaking our ability to stay present with people. It's killing us. Okay, I'm going to put the phone away because some of you are like, man, this guy, I didn't come to hear this at all. But this is taking our focus away. And so here's the question. How do we know how to clear the stage and get back to the place where undistracted lingering becomes a rhythm of our life, where lingering becomes a pattern in our life, and we're not easily distracted by the things that aren't really worth it at the end of the day? I think we see it in Psalm 39. I think we see this pattern in David's life of what this actually looks like. How do you remain present? Now, Psalms, as we know, like they are expressions of the heart. They're the crying out in fear, they're the crying out in praise, they're the crying out in remembrance. They're expressions of the heart. And so David, as he writes Psalm 139, this is a cry of his heart. He is pouring out his heart to the Lord. And what we need to know about David is that David wasn't always a great dude, right? Like David did some jacked up stuff in his life, but we usually see him and we categorize his life by the end of his life. And we see like, man, David was a guy that I really want to hang out with. Like he did all right, but that's us looking at the highlight reel. That's us looking at the top 10 of his life, like the best moments that he was a king of Israel, and he did a pretty good job of being the king of Israel. Like he was called in Scripture a man after God's own heart. That's a pretty big deal, right? He was doing something right. He was also the guy who was in charge of beginning to establish Israel and the worship of God and in this ancient world that was filled with pagan worship and filled with idols and gods all over the place. Like David was part of establishing a culture where God is revered and God is sought after. And so David had some pretty high highs in his life. But David also had a blooper reel, right? He had a not top 10 list as well. Like he wasn't always a great dude. And he jumped head first into an adulterous relationship with Bathsheba. Y'all remember that? Like David jacked up in the relational world. I mean, not only in that, but he was a hustler and a murderer. You remember what he did after he was found out, or after Bathsheba got pregnant because of this adulterous relationship? He runs and he says, we need to get Uriah, her husband, out on the front lines because he needs to die. This can't be uncovered. He's a murderer and he's a hustler. And David is a shady dude. And not only that, like even in his leadership, he's quite shady in his leadership because too, like as a king, as a leader, he is supposed to be leading his armies and supposed to be leading his kingdom. And so in the time where kings are to be out in the fields with their troops battling other armies, Scripture says that David was back home, chilling out at the crib. His boys are out fighting for the country. And here's David back on the roof of his house with binoculars checking out Bathsheba as she's taking a bath on her terrace. David was a shady guy from time to time. And so when we think about David, we're like, whoa, this was a man that was after God's own heart? If he could do it, like maybe I've got a chance. That's not how David's story ends. We don't end with David's blooper reel, right? We remember him as a man after God's own heart because of the things that we read in the Psalms, the expressions of his heart, the way he pours himself out to God. We read in Psalm 51, like after this stuff happened with Bathsheba, here's what David cries out. He says, create in me a clean heart, O God, and renew a right spirit within me. Cast me not away from your presence, and take not your Holy Spirit from me. Restore to me the joy of your salvation and uphold me with a willing spirit. He's saying, don't leave me to die in my sin. Don't leave me where I am. Clean me up. Create in me a clean heart. Like bring me back to this place where I enjoy your presence. Bring me back to this place where I don't run to the things that my heart tend to go after, all these distractions. And then in Psalm 27, it says, one thing I ask of the Lord, that I'll seek after, that I may dwell in the house of the Lord all the days of my life, to gaze upon the beauty of the Lord and to inquire in his temple. He's saying, I just want his presence. Later in that verse, or that chapter, he says, it's your face you tell me to seek, and it's your face, Lord, that I do seek. And face, seeking somebody's face, that was seeking to be in the presence of somebody. And so David says, I don't want anything more than just to be. And so this is a man that messes up. Right? And so we don't remember David because he got everything right. We don't revere David because he got everything wrong. We remember David because he's just like us. We remember David because he had highs and lows. We remember David because there were times where he took his eye off the ball, and we took his eye off the ball and he swung, he missed big. And when he messed up, we remember him because he runs back to God. He doesn't stay lost in this place of distraction. He comes back and says, Lord, bring me to this place where lingering, in this place where I enjoy your presence more than anything else. This place that's with you, unhindered, unadulterated, unfiltered, just before you, so that I may gaze upon your beauty. That's why we remember David, because it doesn't stay locked into this place. And we especially see it here in Psalm 139. He gives us a pattern to be present. He gives us a pattern of how we seek after the Lord as human beings who sometimes have highs and sometimes who have lows, who are sometimes distracted more than we would like to be. And so, are you there in Psalm 139? You with me? This psalm has 4 sections, and so we're going to go down through each section, and we'll just do a little bit of commentary on each one. Verse 1, "O Lord, you've searched me, and you've known me. You know when I sit down and when I rise up. You discern my thoughts from afar. You search out my path and my lying down, and are acquainted with all of my ways. Even before a word's on my tongue, behold, O Lord, you know it altogether. You hem me in behind and before, and you lay your hand upon me. Such knowledge is too wonderful for me. It's too high, or it's high. I can't attain it." Now remember, David is a human being just like you and me, right? A lot of times we come to Scripture and we're reading Scripture. And as we're reading Scripture, we forget that God used human beings to write down the words that he wanted us to read thousands of years later, right? He's using human beings inspired by the Holy Spirit so they're not getting anything wrong, right? God is using their passions, using their desires, using the things that he's created them for, and he's taken that human being and he's writing Scripture. And that's what we call inspiration. But at the same time of being inspired, it's also inerrant. It means that there is no fallibility, that it is without error. So how he takes a human being and writes through them, he makes sure that everything that he wants to be said is hitting the page, and so that it is without error. But when we come to the text, sometimes we forget that it's a human being who's writing this. A human being who has the highs. A human being who has lows, who are just like you and me. And so in other words, we have David here who's writing this. This is the man who has seen his good times and his bad times, and he's sitting here before God, and then in this moment he's just lingering. And he says, "You've searched me, and you've known me." You've already done this work. In other words, there is nothing about me that you don't already know. You know everything. But at the end of this chapter, he comes to verse 23 and 24, and here's what he says. He says, "You know me, you've known me, but now search me, O God, and know my heart. Try me and know my thoughts, and see if there be any grievous way in me, and lead me in the way everlasting." And here's what David's doing in the psalm from the very beginning to the very end. He's saying, "God, you know me. You know me better than I know myself. Help me see what you see about me." And to be honest, right, like none of us like to pull back the curtains of our life like this, right? None of us like to pull back the curtains and let the light shine in to hit the spots that we've been missing in the house. Like, we pull back the curtains, the dust comes in, and we see the things that we've been stepping around. We see the things that we haven't quite swept up yet. We see the things that we thought were hidden that nobody else could see. None of us really like to pull back the curtains of our life. But David is saying, "Lord, like shine your light on every corner of my life, and don't leave anything in here that's not yet exposed." He wants the Lord to see everything and to search him, to see what he sees. And we don't like to do this because it's when we do that, things get pointed out. We see things that we haven't seen before. And we see things that we haven't seen before, then we have to deal with them. We have a choice to either leave it where we found it, or we have to deal with it. But the problem is, once it's been uncovered, it's seen. And you can't unsee what's being seen. It's like us going to the doctor, right? A lot of times we know there's something going on. There's something inside of us that's breaking us down, that's killing us, something we know that's just not right. But we know if we go to the doctor, they're going to put their finger on it, and then it may make some changes. It may mean that we need to make some changes in our life. And so instead of going and fixing the problem or finding out what the problem is, we tend to hide from it. Or we tend to act like nothing is going on, and we begin to try to be distracted or distract our mind to keep ourselves away from that, just hoping that it's going to get better. But creating distractions in our life, it doesn't make it get better. Distraction doesn't bring health. Distraction actually prolongs the problem. And it could make the problem worse because we're acting like it's not even there. And so David, what he's doing is he's lining himself on the exam table, and he's saying, "Lord, you search me. Take everything and you search me." He said, "I don't want just the normal annual exam, right? Like, I'm not just coming in for you to poke and prod on me to give me the surface level stuff." He said, "I don't even want the x-ray, because an x-ray might show me that something's broken, but it's not going to give me why it's broken. It's not going to give me what's going on around it." He said, "I want the CAT scan. Like, get me under the full thing. I want to see what's going on in living color. I want to know what's going on inside of me. I want to see what you see about me. Search me, because you know me better than anybody else does. And I'm going to linger here until you show me. I'm going to sit here until you show up and you search me." Now watch what happens. Verse 1 again, "O Lord, you've searched me and you know me. You know when I sit down and when I rise up. You discern my thoughts from afar. You search out my path and my lying down, and are acquainted with all of my ways. Even before a word is on my tongue, behold, O Lord, you know it all together. You hem me in behind and before, and lay your hand upon me. Such knowledge is too wonderful for me. It's high, and I can't attain it. What David's doing in this moment, in this section, is he's reflecting on the omniscience of God. And omniscience is just a fancy word that means that he is all-knowing. He's reflecting on the fact that God knows everything. There is nothing that's to be known that God doesn't actually already know. And for some of us, that freaks us out. Because in our mind, we're thinking, you mean that God knows everything? Yeah, he knows everything. You mean that God knows all of my thoughts? Yeah, God knows all of your thoughts. You mean that he knows where I've been? Yeah, he knows where you've been, and not only does he know where you've been, he knows where you're going, the things that you're going to do. You mean that he knows what I said? Yeah, he knows what you said, and actually, it's not only that he knows what you said, he knows what you were going to say before you ever formed the words on your lips. He knows everything. And some of y'all, you're freaking out right now because you didn't know that God knows you like that. You didn't know that God had the ability to know like that, that his knowledge has no limits to it. And some of you are just, man, I haven't thought about that in a while. And it's good for me to hear that again. And for some of us, it just makes us feel completely exposed. Like we're laying like the emperor without any clothes on in front of everybody. And it's just, we feel so exposed, we still feel so vulnerable with that. And actually we're a little bit fearful because we don't know what the Lord will do with knowledge like that. For him to know us like that. And here's what David says. With a God who knows everything, he knows our ins and our outs, the good, the bad, and the ugly. In spite of that, in verse 5, he says, you hem me in behind and before, and you lay your hand upon me. What's that mean? I mean, it means that even though that God knows the good, the bad, and the ugly about us, this knowledge doesn't lead him to destroy us. This knowledge leads him to draw us in, for us to feel his embrace, for us to know that he's guarding us and that his presence is permanent, that he's not going to leave us or forsake us. I remember when I was a kid and I was walking around Kmart. Y'all remember Kmart? Remember, the Kmart's a thing up here, or it was a thing up here right before they kind of went under. Like Kmart, like that was like the family reunion in my house, man. Like holiday time, like my whole family, which was huge. Like they're gathering at Kmart. Blue light specials. Who remembers the blue light? Yeah. And so, like all of my cousins, me, like, I'm serious, guys. It's like I look forward to Christmas time because like my whole family's there. And so one time I remember going to Kmart with my family. This one was just my mom and dad and my sister. And we're walking around, and I was an obnoxious 7 to 8 year old, right? Like that's not a stretch of your imagination. I was a bad kid. I didn't listen very well. I just didn't. And so we were hanging out in the store, and I was jumping from rack to rack. I was hiding in closed racks and hiding out there like, you can't see me in here. And then I would go to another. And so like my parents were like, hey, come out of there. And then one time, like in my obnoxiousness, I found myself lost. I stepped out of the racks, and I didn't see my parents anymore. They were nowhere to be found. And so all that obnoxiousness and humor that I thought was amazing at the time, man, I began to freak out. I was afraid. Like I thought I was lost. I didn't know what was going to happen. I began to frantically begin to look around the store to try to find my parents. And in my fear and just like not knowing what's going to happen, like I feel a hand come down and touch my shoulder, to grab my shoulder. And I look up and it's my dad. And it's almost like son, I know you're a mess. I know that you're obnoxious. I know that you haven't been obeying me right now, but I want you to know that I'm here. I haven't forgotten you. Like you're safe with me. And that's the image that David is giving here in this. Like David is laid bare before the majestic knowledge of God. He's laying there and he's allowing the Lord to read him, and he's seeing like he knows everything about me. But he's not terrified because he feels the hand of God on his shoulder. He says, you hem me in behind and before, and you lay your hand upon me. David is safe in the knowledge that God has of him. He's not there to banish him. He wants to draw him in. And this kind of awareness, it doesn't happen, guys, when we're just distracted. This kind of awareness of God, this knowing who he is and how he knows us, it doesn't happen when we enter into his presence and we are fully distracted as opposed to being fully present with him. Look at verse 7. Where shall I go from your spirit? Or where shall I flee from your presence? If I ascend to heaven, you're there. If I make my bed in Sheol, you're there. This is like the furthest extremes. If I take the wings of the morning and dwell in the uttermost parts of the sea, even there your hand shall lead me, and your right hand shall hold me. If I say, surely the darkness shall cover me, and the light about me be night, even the darkness is not dark to you. The night is as bright as day, for darkness is as light with you. What David is saying is there is nowhere to hide. I can't go anywhere from your presence. And so what David is doing in this time of lingering with the Lord, he's reflecting on his omnipresence. And that's just a fancy word that means that God is everywhere all at the same time. He is always present. And there's nowhere that God isn't. And this had to be a thought on David's mind. The fact that like there is nowhere that I can go away from you. There is nowhere that I can go and run and hide from you. Because David has a category for this that he talks about in this psalm. So there had to have been a time. Where can I go that is away from you? There's an old English poet who wrote a poem about this, 182 lines of the poem, actually, about this particular part of the psalm. And he titled it, The Hound of Heaven. Anybody read The Hound of Heaven? Okay. And so the Hound of Heaven, what the poet does is he visualizes God as a hound who's running after a hare, who's running after a rabbit. And everywhere the rabbit is running, he's running, trying to get away from the hound. But everywhere he turns, the hound is there. He makes a right turn, the hound is there. He makes a left turn, that there is nowhere where he can go that the hound can't get him. And eventually, the hound gets to the hare, right? And this is this visual picture of there is nowhere that we can run from where the presence of God is not. There is nowhere that we can go where the grace of God won't find us there. So there's nowhere to hide. In 1968, Apollo 8 was making its journey around the moon. It was in orbit, and it was fantastic. Some of y'all were alive during that time, and you heard this. Some of you weren't. That wasn't a jab on people who were alive right there, all right? It was not. I love old people. But Apollo 8, they were making their trek around the moon, right? Like this hadn't been done like this before. And as they're just relishing in the fact that the moon is fantastic, they look way off in the distance, and they see the marble of the earth and its beauty. And as they're making, I think it was their last time around, their last orbit around the moon, somebody in that time, they opened up the Word of Scripture. And they turned to Genesis chapter 1, and some of y'all heard this over the air. And they aired it, and it was a big deal, and there was a lawsuit about it that happened after this. But they open up Genesis chapter 1, and they begin to recount the God of creation, who had created all the things that they were seeing in this moment. That even in the vast universe, where nobody lives, that you can't escape the beauty and the magnificence and the presence of God. And they were taken aback by this, so much so that they had to talk about over air to the entire world, this is the God who created everything that we see. There's nowhere that you can go. And David realizes this, and he lingers in the presence of God. See, unless we create a pattern for lingering with God like this, we're prone to get into the habit of thinking that we're isolated from Him, that we're away from Him, and that we can run and we can trick ourselves into believing that there's a place that we can go that He won't be. But it's not a good thing to try to hide from God, and it's a good thing that we can't hide from Him, because there is nowhere for us to hide in our shame, and there's nowhere for us to hide in our guilt and our sin. He doesn't leave us to die in that place. He uncovers that so that we might know Him and that we might grow in Him. He knows, and He's there in the midst of it with us. Look at verse 13. For you formed my inward parts, you knitted me together in my mother's womb. I praise you, for I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Wonderful are your works, my soul knows it very well. My frame was not hidden from you when I was being made in secret, intricately woven in the depths of the earth. This is a picture of the mother's womb that's happening here. The creation of a young embryo, where life is beginning. And we could go off on a tangent on this passage about life. We're not going to do that today. We will one day, but that's it's a sermon for another day. But this is the imagery of the womb here. It says, "Your eyes saw my unformed substance. In your book were written, every one of them, the days that were formed for me, when as yet there was none of them. How precious to me are your thoughts, O God. How vast is the sum of them. If I could count them, They are more than the sand. I awake and I am still with you. This is David just being overwhelmed at the magnificent omnipotence of God. And omnipotence here is just the all-powerfulness of God. That there is nothing that can be done that God can't do. That he is able to do anything that he wants to do. And creation for us is the pattern for that. It's designed for that. Not only did he create the world that we live in, but he created the universe in which the world that exists in. And he created all of the order in which that holds all of that together. And not only did he create the world and the universe, but he also created every human being, and he's intricately involved in every creation. Every creation. And David is blown away here at the perfection and the power of God. And if we fail to linger in the presence of God, we miss out on seeing his omniscience, his omnipotence. We miss out on seeing who God is, that there is nowhere that we can run from him. There is nothing about us that he doesn't already know, and it leads us to this place of falling even more in love with him. And so when we clear the stage, we sit in his presence, we're able to see his power like that. And here's what David says in verse 17. How precious to me are your thoughts, O God. How vast is the sum of them. If I could count them, they are more than the sand. I awake and I'm still with you. Now watch what David does in verse 19. It seems like he just goes divergent and just totally takes his mind away from what's happening here. Like this just doesn't seem to fit. We had a good conversation with the team this week. Verse 19. Oh, that you would slay the wicked. Oh God, like where'd that come from, David? Like what's going on in your heart right now, right? Oh, that you would slay the wicked, oh God. Oh, men of blood, depart from me. They speak against you with malicious intent. Your enemies take your name in vain. Do I not hate those who hate you, O Lord? And do I not loathe those who rise up against you? I hate them with complete hatred. I count them my enemies. Whoa! That's some passion right there, huh? Anybody pray prayers like that before? Yeah, raise your hand. Come on now. I mean, there are some times in our life where we just have to get rugged and raw with the Lord. It's like, this is what I feel. And David is saying, Lord, there is nothing that's held back. Like, you know me. I can't hide from you. And if you already know this, I'm going to tell you everything that's in there. And so he says, I hate what's going on. I hate the fact that there are people out here that don't love you, that don't know you, that are enemies against you, and they've become my enemies. Like, I hate this. And so he's just being rugged and raw with the Lord. He says, what I want more than anything in my own life is to gaze upon your beauty, and I want others to do the same. And so here he wraps up in verse 23 and 24. He says, you know me. Search me, O God, and know my heart. Try me and know my thoughts, and see if there be any grievous way in me, and lead me in the way everlasting. Search me, try me, lead me. Here's what David's doing. He said, God, you know me. Let me see me like you see me. Show me what you see. Pull the curtains back in my life. Let the light shine in. Let me see the places that I miss. Expose all the corners. Let the light shine in. And don't leave any area of my life that's unsearched. Show me what you see. Search me, oh God. And this kind of stuff, it doesn't happen if we can't learn to linger. This kind of stuff doesn't happen if we stay lived and locked into, what's the word I'm looking for? Distraction. My brain got distracted. Like if we live in this place of distraction, you want to know why right now? Because my watch is buzzing my wrist telling me to shut up. It's telling me you're done talking, and it's distracting me right now. See, we can't live in this place of lingering when we're caught in this trap of distraction. We just can't. We can't. But when we set aside the distraction, we're not saying stop living. We're not saying like isolate and become a monk somewhere. We're not saying like check out of reality here. We're saying like let's let the distractions not keep us away from the Lord. Let's let those things drive us into his presence. And say, Lord, as long as it takes, I'm going to allow you to search me. If there's anything in me that you need to get out, show me how. And so over the next few weeks in our prayer series here, like we're going to be digging into what it looks like for us just to clear the stage, for us to dive into this place of clearing the place of our heart so that we get comfortable with just lingering. Say, the one thing that I want more than anything is just to sit with you. The one thing, like, I don't need for you to make me better at something. I don't need for you to come in. Like, I want to get good at lingering with you. So over the next few weeks, this week we're diving into searching me. So the prayer for our week is going to be, Lord, search me. Next week we're going to dive into what does it look like to be broken before the Lord. And the week following that, we're going to look at what does it look like for us to say, here I am, Lord, send me. These prayers of where we set aside distraction, we're open and available for the Lord to do his work in and through us. And so we want to give you some hooks for this throughout the series. And so for this week, we've created a calendar. Like for y'all who love lists, like today's your day to shine, all right? Your whole life is vindicated on today, right? Like we're going to give you a list of things to do that help aid in just being present with the Lord. If you want, later on, you'll be able to find it online, but we have printed out prayer calendars for you with just one thing to pray for each day, for that you can just sit and be present with the Lord. They're out at the Welcome Center, so please grab one. Again, we'll have them up online here soon. They're not quite there yet. But I would ask, like, if you find it online, print it off. Like, because even if our computer or our phone is somewhere near us, we're prone to just go after it. And again, I'm not saying that phones or anything like that are bad, but we just need to create healthy relationships around it. So we want you to grab that calendar and to be praying. And then, like, we're actually going to do that right now. We're going to spend a couple minutes, and we're just going to ask the Lord to search us. So I'm going to ask Tony to come on up. And what I'd love for you to do is he's going to play, and I'm going to pray just this prayer of search. Maybe nothing special. I'm just going to pray over you quickly. And then I'm going to invite you for a few minutes as Tony plays to pray. Like, Lord, search me. I'm putting myself on the exam table, and I want to see what you see in me. And then to deal honestly with what he reveals with you. And so I want to ask you to bow your head. And if you're comfortable with this, maybe you can kneel and pray at your chair. If that's comfortable, if it's not comfortable, that's okay. But I just want you to feel the freedom to pray how the Lord leads you to pray this morning. And so we're going to pray this prayer, and then you can spend a little time with the Lord. Father, presence like this it's a discipline. Father, this kind of stuff, it's not easy. We have to create space in our life for this. And so I'm just praying, Lord, that you would search us. Even though, Father, that all the distraction in life pull us away from this, I'm going to pray that you would search us and that you would know our hearts, that you would know the motives in our hearts, that you would reveal those things to us, that you would reveal the areas of anxiety in us, that even our anxiety pushes us away. Father, I want to pray that you would search us and show us if there is anything that offends you in us, that is robbing glory that is due you. Like, we know that we're in Christ, that if we've accepted Jesus and we're living in him, like, we know that. But there are times where we just don't walk in a manner that's worthy of the calling that you've called us to. And so we're praying, God, that you would search us and show us those areas so that we can allow you to live in us and through us in a way that we experience your life and that others experience your life as well. So, Father, show us those areas. I want to see you do your work in us, God. So we're asking now just to search us.